KatieBeth again, and I received a request for a more detailed tutorial on how I made the zero head for the zero beanie I made last year. I made two types, but this one in particular, people wanted to know how to make him. And just a quick review, it was like he went on top of the beanie and the rest of the beanie was his flowy body. I will put the link to that video below if you wanted to check that out. So in this video, I will be showing you how to make the zero head. I kind of made a really long video showing more detailed view of how I did it, but in case you don't want to sit through the entire video, I'm going to try and write out as much of the pattern as I can. I didn't really make a pattern, I just made him. So I'm going to try to write out as much of it as I can in direction form, and then if you want to watch the video to find out exactly how I did it and view how I did it, then you can. Also, I made this little zero head into an ornament, and I don't really need him. So the first person to comment below saying that they want him can have him. Just comment below and then send me your email, send me your address through email. My email is KatieBethDeath@gmail.com. So let's go with this video. So I'm starting out with an H needle or hook, and I'm just making the knot there to start the chain. And I only use the H because that's the hook that I could find. And so right now I'm just making the base for the ball head. I'm moving my yarn closer so it's easier for me to pull. And so to start with, like any type of beanie or ball, you basically make a chain and then make that into a circle. And then from there, you just kind of chain out, or not chain out, you do single stitches out. You'll notice in this video, I kind of spaced a little because I was watching TV while doing it. So some of the times I don't stay consistent with my stitches. Like I'll do single stitches or half stitches. But it generally comes out looking pretty consistent. So this is me making the beginning circle. And it's going to be a pretty long video because I actually pretty much showed me making the entire thing. Some of the parts where I just do the same stitch, I paused and fast forwarded through, but most of it is real time. So I'm still just making that base circle, and now I start going into the circle that I made, and I actually, because I'm expanding it to make the circle bigger, I'm stitching twice in each hole. And then once I feel like I have enough stitches there, then I'll stitch twice like every third hole, and eventually I stitch twice in each hole every 4 times. And then after that, I just kind of continue with the same amount of stitches. I don't add any more, but that's a little further down. So I believe right here, I'm stitching twice in the same hole every 3 times. That was just me pulling the string to try and get the circle a little tighter on the inside. So right there I just did the double stitch in a single hole. Now I'll go a few without doing a double. So 1, 2, 3, and now it'll be the 4th one. So I'll stitch twice in the same hole. And when I'm saying double stitch right here, what I really mean is that I'm doing a single stitch twice in the same hole. If you reach to make a bigger stitch, like an actual double stitch, it'll make the spaces bigger, which we don't want to do. So you're still sticking with single stitches, just every few holes you're going to do twice in the same one, since you're trying to expand the circle and make it bigger. So it's right about at this size that I decide that that's a big enough circle already. I've expanded enough. So now I'm just going to continue on without adding more stitches. I'm just going to keep stitching around and around the amount of stitches that I have. And I believe once in a while I might have added another stitch by mistake and I just didn't go back because I prefer to continue on with my mistakes and see how I can fix it rather than stopping. So now I just keep going around and around. And as you can see, it's a little further on. And it's not expanding anymore, it's just continuing on, so it kind of makes the sides of the circle. And at this point, I could have gone a little further, but I didn't. I start subtracting stitches to bring the circle back in. So that first stitch I did, I skipped one of the stitching areas, skipped over it and stitched into that. And that's what makes the circle smaller. So since when I was making the circle bigger, about every 3 or 4 stitches, I would add a stitch in the same one. So now that I'm making it smaller, every 3 to 4 stitches, I skip over a stitch and stitch into the next one instead. And so that's what will make it smaller. So every once in a while I pause to kind of puff up the circle to see what it'll look like, and the circle is the ball for his head. It's a little bumpy, but it's because I wasn't counting while subtracting stitches, adding and subtracting, so it's not exactly perfect, but once I fill it with stuffing, it'll also puff it up more. And at this point, I have the ball about as circular as I need it to be, but I'm leaving a hole so I can put the stuffing in it. And here I just have already stuffed the stuffing in it, and I'm pulling out a stitch just so I can see where I left off, because I kind of lost the loop that I had left off at. So I just stick my hook in there, and I'm just going to continue stitching around. And I'm also still going to be subtracting stitches about every 3 stitches or so. So about every 3 stitches, I'm going to skip over one of them and just keep making it smaller. And here I set the ball down for a little break. And then when I come back, I get right back into finishing up that circle, closing it up. And here I am getting closer, and since it's so small, I stopped doing like the 3 skipping stitches, and I just start stitching it all together to close up that hole. And once I've actually closed that hole, I will cut off the string and leave enough string that I can hide the string and also seal up any more of the hole that I might need to. So this is me starting the next part of the project. I'm actually starting his nose here. So again, I make the knot to start my chain. And I wasn't sure how long to make it since I was just measuring to however wide I felt like it should be. Making it again, I might have made it a little thicker, so a little longer of a strand. So I measured it on the circle, since a circle is what his nose is going to be attached to. And once I feel like it'll be a wide enough circle, I'll chain the chain together, and that makes that loop. And then from all the holes in the chain is how I start making the length of his nose. And I didn't really need to add any stitches since I already had it at the length that I wanted to have it at, or the width. And so I'll just keep doing single stitches around until I feel like it's long enough. And then from there, I'll start adding stitches to make the bottom shape of the bottom of his mouth, but not quite yet. Here I'm still adding the stitches, or not adding. Here I'm still doing regular stitches just around and around to make that length. And you'll notice through this video, I'm constantly struggling with this string. For some reason, the center of this guy just got really knotted, so I'm constantly pulling at it and yanking it and trying to deal with the knots in there. But here I am just continuing to stitch around there, making that length. So there I was just measuring about how far out from the face it was going to be. I ended up doing a few more circles around just to make it that extra length, because I can shorten it later if I need to. After I get those circles done, I'm going to start making the bottom part of his mouth. So about here is where I feel like I'm ready to start making the bottom part of his mouth. And the easiest way for me was just to grab a light colored Sharpie and make a colored mark on the yarn so I could see where it was that I'm making the expansion. Because I'm expanding the bottom part of his mouth but not the top. So I'll start adding an extra stitch in there. So in one of the holes I'll make 2 stitches each time I come around. And I'll know I came around to the same spot because I'll see that yellow part of the marker. They do make markers that you can put on them. It's like a little ring so that you know where you left off. I just didn't have any readily available to me, so I used what I had, which was a little marker. And it won't show later because I'll turn it inside out so that that marker is not visible. Here I'm checking what I have so far and what progress I've made. The mouth part is starting to make that little indent, so that's pretty good. Excuse my yarn fight here. I'm fighting with the yarn again. And here I am starting up again. And sorry this is kind of out of the screen. I didn't really notice it while I was doing it, that the screen was kind of off. And about here is where I decide I've made the expanding indent enough, so I'm going to start subtracting stitches to start making it smaller. And again, to subtract stitches, you just skip over one of the holes you would normally crochet in and just keep going. And I'm going to show you a view here. There's a quick little view how it had expanded, and then I'm subtracting it already, so it's starting to get smaller. And now I'm just about done with the cone nose. I'm just measuring it up against the ball to see how well that is, or how well it matches up. And I was pleased enough with it. And now I'm just going to start subtracting every other stitch to try and make the cone end already. So I'm ready to bring it to a point. So I'm just subtracting every other stitch. And then I just start crocheting it through itself. Sorry I cut this out. Would have been a lot more helpful if I had managed to get it in the screen. And now I actually have the cone done. Looks pretty good there, so I'm just going to cut the string and then pull the tail through. And then I'm going to keep that extra string there so that I can use it to sew the ball on, the ball nose. And because I had made that yellow mark, I'm actually just going to turn the cone inside out so that you won't see the yellow mark anymore. And this is me just hiding that thread. Oh, actually, I had not quite turned it inside out yet. And here's that yellow mark that I was using as a counter, and I want to That's why I'm turning it inside out, to hide that yellow mark. And here I decided that I didn't really need the tail around the base of the nose or the mouth, so I'm actually just trying to hide that thread so that it won't be getting in the way when I try to actually sew it onto the ball. So after hiding the thread, this is what I had left. It looked pretty good, and I have actually already stuffed it with the stuffing here. And I felt like it was a little too long of a snout, so I kind of tucked in the edges, and I felt like that was a pretty good length. And the tip of the nose string I wanted to keep, so I'm just hiding it to the side now. Or wrapping it around and hiding it so that it doesn't get in the way when I'm sewing the snout on. And I'm just using one of the ends from the ball to sew it on. So it's actually already attached to the ball, and I'm just using the string to sew on the snout. And once I'm satisfied that the snout is actually sewed on enough, I just hide the string, and I do that by just pushing the needle through and pulling it through different areas so that it'll be hard to pull that snout off. And now I'm starting on the ears. So I make my loop to start a chain. And I wasn't quite sure how long I wanted the chain, so I kind of measured against the head. I believe I chained 6 so that I'd have that extra loop so I can just keep chaining 5. And now that I'm towards the end of the length that I want to make my ears, I'm actually going to start tapering off so that it's not a square at the end, it's more rounded. And I do this by skipping stitches. So actually here I'm just finishing up that row, and then on the next row, instead of going into where I would normally go, I'm going to skip over it and skip that stitch, and then undo the same thing on the next row. And then it should kind of leave me a tapered off edge. And I'm showing you a little bit there. So I'm going to put my needle back on the thread and then hide the thread. So the extra thread on the tip I want to hide, but I'm keeping the extra thread at the beginning from where I started so that I can sew it on. And sorry again, I really didn't notice that this was out of frame. So this is just hiding the thread through the tapered end. And one tip, you can also keep hiding the thread through it to make it thicker and more stiff if you wanted a more stiff ear. I didn't do that on this one, but I did on a previous one that I made. And now I have the 2 ears ready. And with the extra string that's at the beginning of the chain that I made initially, I'm going to sew the ear on. And I'm just kind of folding it over to kind of give them that flowy and floppy ear type of look. And to get the ears kind of how I wanted, I kind of curled the ends also. And here is my almost finished product with the 2 ears sewn on. I did kind of get them a little lopsided, didn't get them quite perfect. And here I'm just kind of curling them in and then fluffing up the other part of the ear. And this is basically what the zero head will look like. I'm actually pretty pleased with it. And now I'm going on to make the little red nose. And for this, I'm basically going to do the same process that I did to make the ball head, but I'm just making a ball nose, so I'm just going to make it a lot smaller, so a lot fewer stitches than I had originally made for the head. And here I have the ball pretty much made, so I'm just going to grab some stuffing. I don't need much. And if you made the nose even smaller, you probably wouldn't need any. So I'm just shoving that stuffing in there. And then I'm just going to keep crocheting around, skipping stitches to bring the ball to a close. And now that the nose is done, I'm going to take the end of the string, put the needle on it, and one end I'm going to hide the string, and the other end I'm going to save to use to sew the nose on. So this first end, I'm just going to hide the string by just putting it through, feeding it through, I guess. And now I'm threading that other string so that I can sew the nose on. And now with the white string, I'm just going to try and hide any of the excess red stitches that I didn't want showing. And once again, I'm just fluffing him out a little more. Fluffing his ears up to make him look cute. And just showing myself some more angles and showing you some other angles of him. Or the same angles, just repeated. And now I'm going to make the little black eyes. And just like making the balls, you chain about 3 and then chain it together. And you really just keep crocheting around that until you have about the size, the circle to be about the size that you want for an eye. So now I'm about ready to check if it's the size that I want. And yep, that's about the size that I want for my eyeball. So I'm just going to finish that up by cutting it and then hiding the rest of my thread through it. And then I'm going to make 2 eyeballs. Here are the 2, about the size that I want. And then I just use that extra thread hanging out from the middle where I started to actually sew the eyes on. And I'm going to show you that process right now. And there you have it. We have our 0 head to put on top of your beanie, or I'm going to end up using it as an ornament. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. This was a really long video. Sorry about that, but I wanted to actually show you how I did it. And I hope you knew that you could just fast forward through whatever part you didn't want to watch. And thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.